its domains across the suites that we have monitoring presence in our item portfolio, and then yeah, have the consolidated data lake for doing analytics as well as reporting. And while we of course have out of the box reports available in BVD, there are advanced reporting needs from our customers, especially with many of our customers being used who have our reporting products in use, like OBR, where they have access to a full-fledged BI tool to do everything and then design advanced reports, including scheduling and all that stuff. So our approach to meeting such needs is to encourage them to bring their own BI tool and then yeah, plug it into our Optic data lake and build their own reports on top of it, right? So that's just the background of why we talk about this actively and present it. And in order to make it easier and assist the customers in that journey to build their own reports in a BI tool, we have published a white paper, as many of you might be aware, and the links and references are provided here. So the white paper is fairly detailed. That it first of all, of course, talks about the concept of the or the approach we are following with this Bring Your Own BI. In addition, it of course has some example reports that are built in 3 different BI tools. So, and the BI tools that we have included in the examples are Microsoft Power BI, Tableau, and Grafana. The choice of the tools came as a recommendation from product management based on their survey with the customers, especially Power BI and Tableau. And then I think Grafana was more of a demand that came a lot of folks from the field itself, and therefore we included Grafana as one of the example tools. So using these example tools, the white paper highlights how to build step by step, including screenshots, reports in these 3 tools. So it's just kind of a quick start, getting started guide to build your own first example report using this white paper. And regarding these 3 BI tools, I also wanted to give you a little more background and what are the various options, deployment options available with these tools, just so that you're more aware when you're having these conversations with your customers. So, starting with so at the high level, by the way, all of these tools have some concept of a tool which is used for designing the reports, and then there is a platform on which you actually deploy and consume the reports, right? Except Grafana takes a different approach, where the whole deployment within which you design and that's essentially your deployment of the report. But yeah, so speaking of Tableau to begin with, so there is a design tool called Tableau Desktop. And within Tableau Desktop, there are 2 versions. One is of course, the full-fledged licensed version, and the other one is public edition, which is free. The main difference between the two is, or rather the limitation in the public edition, is that it can't connect to any database sources. It can only connect to local files like CSV files or Excel files, and so on. So in that sense, actually, the public edition is not very relevant for us, because we, of course, always in our use cases want to connect to the Optic data lake, which is our Vertica database. So you can't really use the public edition for our use cases. So yeah, nevertheless, you use either the desktop or the public edition to design your report, and then you publish the report either on the on-prem solution, which is the Tableau server, or their cloud offering called as Tableau on-prem. And you might have the question that when you deploy it in the cloud on Tableau Online, how do you access data which is in your Vertica database, which might be on-prem? And For that scenario, Tableau has an additional piece of software called Tableau Bridge, which you deploy in your environment. And the Tableau Bridge is something which, yeah, as the name suggests, acts as a bridge between the Tableau Online and your on-prem data source connections, so that you can still continue working with the live reports on the cloud deployment. Uh, Similar to the Tableau Online, which is of course again licensed, there is also a free cloud offering called Tableau Public. Um, the main limitation is that Tableau Public is it's not secure in the sense that everybody can see whatever you publish on Tableau Public. So obviously, any confidential information in your reports that you wouldn't like to expose to general public, you can't deploy on Tab, Tableau Public. Sorry. Uh, so yeah, that's just information about Tableau. Speaking a little bit about Power BI, similar, it has a design tool called Power BI Desktop. And unlike Tableau, Power BI Desktop is completely free, so it's not licensed at all. So, and in fact, that's one of the reasons why our labs for this session are using Power BI Desktop and not Tableau, because Power BI Desktop is free. So you design the reports in Power BI Desktop, and then again, you have two options to either deploy to the on-prem solution called Power BI Report Server, or their cloud platform called Power BI Service. And Microsoft also has a similar solution for accessing your on-prem data from your cloud deployed reports using a software called Data Gateway. Unlike Tableau, Power BI does not have any free cloud publishing service. Finally, Grafana. So Grafana is free. Also, they do have some licensed version called Grafana Enterprise. And they also have a cloud offering called Grafana Cloud, which is free, and then Grafana Cloud Pro, which is licensed, right? So that's just very quick information about BI tools that we have highlighted in the white paper. Of course, nowhere in the white paper or anywhere we are recommending any particular tool, right? Because we don't want to come out as promoting any particular tool. These are just tools which came out as more popular from our customers based on product management survey, and so we are showing the examples using these tools. And if your customer has any of the other BI tools, then they could follow similar approach using that BI tool as well. Um, the main thing is obviously going to be they being aware of our underlying schema, right? So that is in some ways highlighted by this white paper. And of course, there is a reference. Actually, there is a reference, yeah, within from the practitioner notes on the docs portal, uh, which is referring to our documentation page, which details the underlying optic database schema for all of the domains that we have data collection support for already. So system resources, which collects from agents inside scope, things like CPU memory utilization, file system, disk, and all that information. Then, of course, the events data coming from OBM, synthetic transaction data coming from BPM, real transaction data from RAM. So all of these schemas are already present in our optic data lake, and there is detailed documentation about the schema as well, which you can refer to for consuming it in any other, consuming the information in any other BI tool. Just going over quickly through some sample reports, and then of course I also have live demonstration of some of these reports, as well as I will also run through the demonstration of building a report end-to-end from scratch in Tableau. So here is, of course, nothing very fancy in the report here. It's showing you the average CPU and memory utilization across the period of time that is selected by the customer. And let me just see if I can include a laser pointer. Oops. So yeah, the user selects the time range that she wants to report on, and this can be adjusted. Select specific set of nodes that you want to report on, and for all of those nodes, the CPU and memory utilization gets charted for the selected period. So nothing very fancy there. Here is another example report, which is a tree map of CPU and memory utilization. And as described over here, in the top section, which is showing you the CPU utilization tree map, the boxes are sized by the number of CPUs on each of the servers or on that server. And the color of the box is determined by the value of the CPU utilization metric, right? So higher the CPU utilization, the redder it is, and the lower it is, the greener it is. And similarly for the memory utilization, the size of the box is determined by the amount of RAM on the server, and the color by the memory utilization value. Here is another report which is charting the CPU utilization over time, but the difference is that it gives the option for the user to identify certain outliers beyond the upper and lower limit. So in essentially beyond the band that is determined by the factor of standard deviations, and the factor is input that is provided by the user, right? The idea behind the report is that typically in data distribution, data outside 3 times the standard deviation is usually considered an anomaly. And if you are analyzing your environment for how many outliers you have beyond an X factor of standard deviation, then you can do such an analysis using this report. So the user selects the number of times the standard deviation that you want to identify the band. So by default, it is like 1 times the standard deviation, right? So over here is in the center is the mean line. The upper limit is 1 time standard deviation above, and the lower limit is 1 time standard deviation below the mean, right? And then the report just highlights the points that are outside the upper and lower limits. So all the CPU utilization values greater than the upper limit, and all the CPU utilization values lower than the greater limit, the lower limit. And similarly, so over here it's using the average CPU utilization. For such outliers use case, I think it might be more interesting to consider the maximum values as opposed to the average. And so the lower chart over here is providing the same analysis using the max CPU utilization for the selected server, and the user selects the time range and server from here, which is standard across most reports. Okay. Uh, Here is another simple capacity planning report, which takes the input of course, the time range, and in addition, it takes the input of low and high thresholds for both the CPU and memory from the user. And then for the low thresholds, it identifies the systems below that threshold, both for CPU and memory. And similarly, for high thresholds, it identifies the systems having CPU and memory utilization greater than the high threshold, right? So, and then it also color codes so that, again, similar color coding, lower the value. Well, it's actually in this case, the color coding is a little different for systems below threshold and above thresholds. So when you are identifying systems below threshold, you are probably more interested in identifying systems that are least utilized, and maybe you want to either reduce the resources or, decommission the systems or whatever the use case may be. And so the lower the value, the redder the color, and higher the value, greener the color. Versus in case of systems above the threshold, it's greater the value, redder the color, and lower the value, greener the color. And similarly for the memory utilization. Here is an example report. This is coming off Grafana, and this is also one of the example uh, dashboards that is built in the white paper and showcased. So it's a cross-domain report in the sense it's bringing in data from various different domains. So of course you have your event data based on the event data streamed by OBM into COSO or the optic data lake, right? So open events in last 24 hours, in progress, and closed events, and then the top systems based on CPU utilization and memory utilization coming from the systems resources domain. And over here you have the first transaction chart breakdown of with the data coming from BPM. Here's another example report. This one is built in Power BI, which just shows you a snapshot of your event statistics. Number of open events, average event closure time in minutes. Some idea about your effectiveness of your correlation rules. Highlighting the correlation ratio, and then average response time of the operators. And in context of these data, it is of course useful to get an idea about the overall volume of your events in the environment. So here it's giving you the total incoming events distribution by severity, and then total closed events by severity. And again, not just showing you the snapshot, but also giving you an idea about the trend of your event volume, right? So over here it's showing you the critical and major daily events trend, which are these bars over here. And then this black line over here is actually the total daily events trend, right? So they are both charted together to give more information. Again, to identify your most noisy elements in terms of the event volumes, this chart is showing you first of all your in the top left quadrant, it's showing you that your most noisy policies, right? Uh, so, here are the different policy names, and for these last 4 months, based on the time range selected by the user, here is my event volume, and it's obviously sorted in the descending order of the event volume. So my unassigned policies have the maximum event volume, and then you can see the other policies and event volume for each of those. And it's showing you only the top 10 policies. Similarly, over here in the top right quadrant, it's showing you the most noisy CIs, most noisy CI types, and then most noisy event, or the most event volume by the event type indicators, right? Okay, so with that, I will actually switch to a live demonstration. So, okay. So first, yeah, the same reports which I already just showcased, and this is the live demonstration of it. So this is the report which identifies the outliers, right, beyond the standard deviation factor that is provided by the user. So right now it is one standard deviation, and you can see there are these values for this system which is below the lower limit, and here are some values which are above the upper limit. Here is the mean, 52% is its mean utilization, right? So as you can see, number of standard deviations currently considered, the factor is 1. So 1 times the standard deviation. If I increase this, the band will obviously become wider. So the band becomes wider, and now I have only one data point which is outside that band, and I can make it 3, but then all my datas are within the band. So just to make it look more interesting, I have left it at 1 so that you can see the highlighted data points. So that's just one, and of course you can pick and choose the system you want to analyze, right? Okay, so that's one report. Here is the other report, which identifies systems for CPU and memory utilization below and above the low and high thresholds. So Again, I can of course change the number of days that I analyze the data for. So then, as you can see, my number of days increases here. I'll leave it at 7 because it's just fitting within the available real estate. Then I can increase and decrease the CPU load threshold. So if I want to, so this is the window which is showing me systems with CPU utilization below the threshold, below the low threshold. So if I decrease this, as you can see, number of systems is decreasing. 0, then obviously there is nothing, um, and so on. So you can play around with all the low and high thresholds. Here is my memory utilizations below 70 currently. Okay, and as you can see, it's decreasing and increasing in the step of 5 because that's how I have designed the report. We can also, of course, edit the report to change by what value it steps up and down. And then similarly for the high threshold and low thresholds, right? Okay, so that's that, what I call the capacity planning report. And then here is the tree map example. So this, you already got the idea. Like I said, there is nothing much to demonstrate here other than the time range, which is available as a input option by the user. Um, so if I change this, you might see some of the color codes changing a little bit. If I make this 90, okay, so yeah, there isn't really much difference in the values, so it doesn't stand out the different colors as in when you change the time range. Let's see if I give 2 days. Yeah, as you can see, this box over here changes the color a little bit. Yeah. Okay, so that's just that. And so that's the reports I wanted to showcase. And now let me showcase, how to build a report from scratch. So I'll be building this tree map report. Then, since probably this is an interesting report, also visually more attractive if you need to showcase to your customers. So I'm going to start building a new report from scratch. Okay, so I'm going to connect to my Optic Data Lake, and here is the database on our AWS setup. This is the same which you would be using for the labs. Okay, then I select that my schema is MF shared provider default. That's where all the performance metrics data, all the tables go under this schema. And then I'm interested in the CPU utilization data, right? So under OPSB agent node, and I'm going to pick the hourly table for this report. So here is the OPSB agent node hourly table which I have picked up. Over here there are two options, whether you want to maintain a live connection or you want to extract the data and cache it in some local database that Tableau maintains. I'm going to leave it at live connection for now. Update the data. Okay, and now I'm going to go into this worksheet to start designing the report, right? So I'm going to select, obviously I'm interested in my node name since I need to provide that information along with whatever metric I'm reporting on. And let's start with CPU utilization. So I'm going to include CPU utilization. Now, as you can see over here, CPU utilization doesn't sound like correct values, right? It's all a lot of values are all, rather all values are more than 100. That's because by default it assumes a summation. So we need to change this to average, and now the values look a little more realistic. I'm going to change, by default it has given me a table. I'm going to change this to the tree map that we are interested in, so I go ahead and select the tree map. Now by default when you do that, it has sized the box by the CPU utilization value, as well as the color coding is also by the CPU utilization value, right? As you can see over here, there is something called as color, and that is determined by the CPU utilization value, and this is size, that is also determined by the CPU utilization value. What we want is obviously want to determine the size of the box by the number of CPUs on the server, right? So we are going to find the metric which provides the number of CPUs, which is over here, right? So CPU count. And yeah, just so that you can see the difference, right now this Pu01 is showing as the biggest box because its CPU utilization is the maximum among all the nodes being monitored on this system. And the moment we bring in the max CPU count, first of all, what I want to do is I don't want to consider the summation of the CPU counts, right? I want the maximum value. All the records should have same value anyways, because it's just a CPU count. It doesn't change. But Tableau doesn't know that. So I need to tell Tableau that please use the maximum value and not sum or average. And now I'm going to drag and drop this on the size because I want the number of CPUs to determine the size of the boxes. The moment I drop this, you will see that the boxes rearrange, and this Pu01, which was the biggest box, is now actually the smallest box because it has only 4 CPUs on that node, versus this other ones have 16 CPUs, 8 CPUs, and so on. Uh, to make that aspect that the boxes are sized by the CPU count, it might make sense, it might be more intuitive to include that in the label. So I will also drag and drop this CPU count in the label so that alongside the node name, you can also see the CPU count, right? So I have 16 CPU, 8 CPU, and so on. Now this is my CPU utilization tree map. So that's that. Now, similarly, I want to build my memory utilization chart. So first of all, I'm going to add a data source. So this, by the way, also gives you an idea about that you can add different data sources within the same Tableau worksheet and then combine that into a common dashboard. So this is how you go about adding multiple data sources in Tableau. So this time I'm going to include use the sysinfra node 1H table. Okay, and I'm going to go to my sheet 2. Just going to rename this so that I know which sheet I'm looking at. This is memory. Okay, so again, node name. Where is my memory utilization value? There is my memory utilization, and as you know, we need to change the aggregation from sum to average. So I can do that here instead of after putting it here. And this way, whenever you include this metric, it by default considers whatever you have given. So in this case, average, right? Okay, and change this to a tree map. Again, by default, the size of the box and the color both are being determined by the memory utilization value. And we want the actual amount of RAM, right? And that is, where is that? Memory. Where is my oh, I'm in the node 1H table, so I'm going to clear this. That was my mistake. I was looking at still at the agent node table. Okay, so I cleared the sheet. I'm going to do this again. Memory node and memory utilization average. Okay, change this to a tree map, and here is my amount of RAM on each of the nodes. Again, I'm going to take the maximum value and tell Tableau don't do any aggregation, use the maximum value. And again, this Pew box is the biggest because its memory utilization is maximum, but it's going to change the moment I size it by the amount of RAM. That's because it has only 8 GB of RAM versus these guys have 62 GB RAM, as you can see in the mouse over. And again, I'm going to include that information in my label to make it a little more intuitive. Uh, so there you have it. Now I also have my memory utilization tree map ready. I of course want to include the time filter, right? So that the user is able to filter the time. Oh, by the way, while this color coding is not bad, oftentimes to highlight something to draw attention to, especially the high utilization values, we are used to more used to the green red color scheme, right? So then we can change this to red green diverging, and I want my higher values to be on red versus what's shown over here. So I'm going to reverse this. I'm going to increase the color gradation maybe across by 25 different values, and yeah, there you have that. I can do the same thing for my memory chart. Okay, so I have that, and I of course want to increase my include my time filter. So where do we, here we have the timestamp utilization, which I want to include in the filter, right? So I'll say show filter. So I have my filter here, uh, and in fact I don't want time filter at the year level, so I'm going to remove the filter, include it here. Let's say relative date, right? And I want to say for, let's say, like last 30 days by default, and of course then the user can change it. Okay, now I'm going to include this filter. So as you can see over here, the user can then play around with the relative time filter. And I'm going to say apply these worksheets to all sheets that use this data source, so it will automatically apply to this sheet as well. And last but not the least, now I'm going to create a dashboard which shows both of these together. Right, so first of all, I'm going to include a title for my report. Let's make it a little bigger. Okay, and then I'm going to include the two sheets which we have designed. So first is CPU. I'm going to fit the whole thing, entire view, and here is the time filter. Okay, we can of course play around with the formatting and placement and all of that as much as you want. Okay, probably don't need to show the title over here. It's, I think, obvious. So that's that. And then I'm going to include the memory. Okay, fit the entire view. Okay, and then of course you can play around with the background color and all of that, but which you can take of course as much time as you want for the beautification. Uh, but yeah, you from a use case perspective, you now have your dashboard ready, which is now ready to be deployed, and you can publish your workbook to Tableau online. Um, so so yeah, that's that. And with that, that's all I had to present and showcase. There are any questions?
One comment, we have that recorded as demo easel on the download section. You can find it there if you want to use it to show it to a customer or something.
Yep. Thank you, Alan.
Alon, sorry, you said that there is a available live environment? I didn't
No,
get
no,
that.
not live environment. We have a demo recorded that
Okay.
a clickable demo, like executive demo, that you
Okay.
can use. It's attached
Okay.
in the download
With
section.
Tableau? With Tableau or Grafana?
Yes, with Tableau.
Okay.
Because we don't have an exercise because of the licensing. So we
Yes.
have exercises only for Power BI and Grafana.
Okay, great.
And this one we recorded for you as a demo easel, so you can use it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, I will stop
Ankit,
there.
Ankit,
Yes.
this is Heinz.
Hi,
Are
Heinz.
these the dashboards you have created here? Are they in any way available? I think you can, for all of these tools, you can export the dashboards you have created, right? The reports. Is there a place where we could pick them up? Is there any use of those on another system? I would think so, as the data is more or less always the same. Would it make sense to provide these files as a starting point?
Yeah, so as you rightly said, Heinz, for all of these, for Tableau, all of these reports are available as what they call as Tableau workbook. And so for all of these reports which I showcased today, we already have the Tableau workbooks which I have provided to Alexi and Alon. They should be able to distribute to you appropriately,
Yeah.
that they see it, right?
Maybe I don't know what our policy is on these third-party tools, but I know that in other products on the practitioner section on our docs portal, such things are described, and the artifacts are also provided also to end customers. Or would it be a way to package them and provide them through marketplace?
Yeah, that's
As
so you hit
kind
it.
of just a giveaway to customers to say, okay, here you can go with it. We are not supporting it, but use it as you want as a starting point.
Yeah, exactly. That's our plan, Heinz, that we are going to publish all of these workbooks or the Power BI, PBI files on Marketplace for customers to download, as of course
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
community edition, so that we don't have any
Mhm.
supportability for these
Exactly.
artifacts. But yeah, customers can download and start building from there.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any more questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Ankit. Let me stop the recording.